December 18th, 1944. 02:47 hours. Bastogne, Belgium. 14 degrees below zero. Corporal Elliot Brennan crouches in a frozen foxhole pressed against earth as hard as concrete. 22 years old. Signal Corps radio.
Strategy is flawed, sir. Your
His breath
inconsistent are
comes
as
in
noted,
white
soldier,
clouds that
but the
freeze
orders
on the
stand.
scarf
Trust in the
wrapped
plan.
around his face. Around him, the darkness is absolute. Snow falls in sheets so thick he cannot see his own hands. He adjusts the headphones clamped over his wool cap. Static crackles. Then voices. German voices, clear and precise, cutting through the white noise like razors. Brennan's fingers rest on a captured Funkgerät transceiver. German military radio equipment salvaged from a destroyed Panzer 3 days ago. The metal is so cold it burns through his gloves. He has been monitoring this frequency for 6 hours, listening to men who command his death. Now he presses the transmit button. He speaks. Perfect German. Bavarian accent. The voice of authority. Panzergruppe Eisen, hier ist Oberst Müller, Divisionskommando. Neue Befehle. Panzer Group Iron, this is Colonel Muller, Division Command. New orders. This transmission is illegal under United States military law. Article 104 of the Manual for Courts Martial. Unauthorized communication with enemy forces. The penalty in wartime is explicit. Death by firing squad. This transmission could end Brennan's life before dawn. This transmission will save 300 American lives. For 31 years, the United States Army will classify this incident as top secret. The records will be sealed. The witnesses silenced. The truth buried in archives marked with stamps that forbid public memory. This is the story they tried to hide. The United States Army Signal Corps regulations are clear. Never transmit on enemy frequencies. Never engage in unauthorized communication. Never impersonate enemy personnel. These are not suggestions. They are orders backed by military law enforced by courts martial, punishable by death. Military lawyers called Brennan's action treason. His commanding officer explicitly refused authorization. The legal framework left no room for interpretation. What Brennan planned to do violated every protocol his commanders had drilled into him since basic training. Until he pressed the button anyway. Until 12 German Panzer tanks turned south and drove 8 kilometers in the wrong direction. Until 300 American soldiers opened their eyes to a dawn they were supposed to die before seeing. Bastogne, Belgium. Night of December 17, 1944. The situation is catastrophic. The 101st Airborne Division holds the town, but barely. They are encircled, surrounded by German forces that outnumber them 3-1. The temperature has plummeted to 14 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. Blizzard conditions reduce visibility to less than 50 yards. The snow is waist-deep in places. Soon, movement is agony. For 2 days, no supplies have reached the American position. No food, no ammunition, no medical supplies. The weather has grounded all aircraft. The C-47 transport planes that might bring relief sit frozen on distant airfields, unable to fly through the storm. 400 American soldiers huddle in foxholes and cellars. They wrap themselves in blankets stripped from dead civilians. They share the last cigarettes. They try not to think about frostbite claiming their fingers and toes in the darkness. The ammunition situation is critical. Most soldiers have 15% of normal ammunition stocks. Some rifle companies are down to 8 rounds per man. Artillery units have fewer than 10 shells remaining. When the German attack comes, there will not be enough bullets to stop it. The German forces massing in the darkness are formidable. The 6th SS Panzer Army and the 5th Panzer Army have smashed through American lines in the Ardennes forest, creating a massive bulge in the Allied front. This is why history will call it the Battle of the Bulge. German commanders believe they can split the Allied forces, drive to Antwerp, and change the outcome of the war. Bastogne is the key. If it falls, the German offensive succeeds. If it holds, the offensive stalls. Right now, holding seems impossible. 23:40 hours, December 17th. Elliot Brennan volunteers for the German radio monitoring detail. This is not a standard assignment. Most radio men rotate through monitoring duties, but Brennan specifically asks for this shift. He has a reason, a skill he has kept carefully hidden for 3 years of military service. He speaks German, fluently, with a native accent that can pass for a Bavarian officer. His grandmother taught him. He never put it on his enlistment forms. In 1941, America being fluent in German made you suspect. It made people wonder about your loyalty. It made you a target for accusations of sympathy with the enemy. So Brennan kept quiet. He listed no foreign languages. He worked as a standard radio man, monitoring American frequencies, relaying messages, maintaining equipment. But tonight he puts on the headphones and tunes the captured Funkgerät to the German tactical frequency. And he understands every word. At first it is routine chatter. German officers coordinating logistics, supply convoys, troop movements. The mundane machinery of war conducted in a language most Americans cannot comprehend. Then at 23:47 hours the traffic changes. A new voice, sharp, authoritative, the cadence of a commander issuing final orders. Panzergruppe Eisen here, Hauptmann Steiner. Panzergroup Iron, this is Captain Steiner. Brennan's hand stops moving. He adjusts the headphone, pressing it tighter against his ear. The static clears. Steiner's voice comes through with perfect clarity. Steiner coordinates the final details of an attack. Target American defensive positions on the eastern perimeter of Bastogne. Time 60 hours, December 18th. 6 hours from now. Strength Panzer Lehr Division. 12 Panzer IV medium tanks. 250 Waffen-SS infantry, supporting artillery. Coordinates, Steiner reads them off. Grid references that Brennan recognizes. He has studied the maps. He knows exactly where those coordinates point. The weakest section of the American defensive line. The place where ammunition is lowest, where the foxholes are shallowest, where frostbite has claimed the most men, where soldiers are too exhausted to fight effectively. If the Germans attack there, the line will collapse in minutes. Brennan does the mathematics in his head. 300 American soldiers in that sector, maybe 312 counting walking wounded pressed into defensive positions. Against 12 panzers and 250 SS infantry with artillery support, they will last perhaps 20 minutes. Casualty projections are not speculation. They are mathematics. With ammunition at 15% and no room to maneuver, the soldiers in that sector face 3 options. Die in their foxholes, die running, or surrender and face German prisoner of war camps where conditions are known to be brutal. Estimated casualties 200 to 300 killed in action. The remainder captured. Survival rate somewhere between 3 and 20%. Brennan listens to Steiner coordinate with his tank commanders. He listens to them confirm positions. He listens to them synchronize watches. He listens to them count down to an attack that will slaughter men Brennan has trained with, eaten with, frozen with. He rips off the headphones. His hands are shaking. Not from cold, from understanding. He knows what is going to happen in 6 hours. He is the only person in the American defensive perimeter who knows. Brennan runs. His boots slip on ice-covered duckboards laid across the frozen mud. The command post is 200 yards away, buried in the cellar of a half-destroyed building. He crashes through the doorway past the guards who recognize him. Captain Lowell Garrett looks up from a map table. 43 years old, Pennsylvania National Guard before the war, high school principal in civilian life. Now he commands a company of men fighting for their lives in sub-zero darkness. Brennan reports. He keeps his voice steady. He recites the details. German transmission. Panzer Group Iron. Captain Steiner. Attack at 06:00 hours. Eastern Sector, 12 tanks, 250 infantry. Garrett's face does not change expression. He has heard bad news before. He has delivered worse news. He motions for Brennan to mark the coordinates on the map. Brennan points to the eastern defensive line. Garrett stares at the map. The silence stretches. Finally, Garrett speaks. "We can't reposition." 3 words, each one a death sentence. "We don't have the ammunition to move units. We don't have transport. Most of our vehicles are frozen solid. If we pull men from other sectors to reinforce the east, we expose those sectors, and we have no reserve. Everyone is on the line." Garrett's voice is flat. This is not defeatism. This is mathematics. This is logistics. This is the calculus of men and bullets and frozen ground. Brennan tries again. "Sir, they'll be slaughtered." "I know, Corporal." The words hang in the freezing air between them. Garrett knows he has already done the mathematics. He has already counted the dead. He simply has no solution. Brennan pushes. "Air support." "Weather's socked in. Nothing's flying. Won't clear for 48 hours minimum." "Artillery. 8 rounds left total. We're saving them for a breakthrough attempt." "Reinforcement. Patton's Third Army is 18 hours away at best. They won't get here in time." Garrett looks at Brennan, really looks at him. There is something in the captain's eyes that Brennan has not seen before. Not fear, not defeat, something worse. Acceptance. "We hold position, Corporal. We dig deeper. We make every bullet count, and we pray that Patton gets here before they overrun us." It is not a plan. It is a hope. And hope is not enough to stop 12 Panzer tanks. Brennan salutes, turns to leave, gets 3 steps toward the door before he stops. He stands there, back to Garrett, hand on the door frame. The frozen air burns his lungs. He speaks without turning around. "Sir, let me transmit on their frequency. In German, I can redirect them." The silence that follows is absolute. Brennan hears Garrett's chair scrape on concrete as the captain stands. Hears his boots on the floor. Feels Garrett step closer. When Garrett speaks, his voice is very quiet. "Corporal Brennan, what you are proposing is a violation of Article 104 of the Manual for Courts Martial. Unauthorized communication with enemy forces. Do you understand what that means?" "Yes, sir. In wartime, that offense carries a capital sentence. Execution by firing squad. Do you understand that?" "Yes, sir." "You are proposing to impersonate a German officer, to deceive enemy forces, to conduct psychological warfare without authorization from theater command. Any one of those actions is sufficient grounds for court-martial." Brennan finally turns around, looks Garrett in the eyes. 300 men, sir." Garrett's jaw works. He is a high school principal. He spent 20 years teaching teenagers algebra and trying to keep them from smoking in the bathrooms. He never wanted to be in a position where he had to weigh military law against the lives of 300 soldiers. "I can't authorize that, Corporal." "I know, sir. If you do what you're suggesting, you're acting alone, without orders, without authorization. And if they catch you, if anyone finds out, I can't protect you." "I understand, sir." Garrett stares at him. The silence stretches again. Finally, Garrett nods. Once. A tiny movement. "Get out of my command post, Corporal. Return to your monitoring station, and for God's sake, don't do anything stupid." Brennan salutes, turns, walks out into the frozen night. Behind him, he hears Garrett pick up the field telephone. Hears him crank the handle to connect to battalion headquarters. Hears him ask for Major Raymond Hastings. 1 hour later, 01:15 hours, December 18th. Brennan sits in his foxhole. The captured Funkgerät rests on a wooden crate powered by a battery that is slowly dying in the cold. Corporal Nate Holbrook crouches beside him. 31 years old, Cleveland factory worker before the war, backup radioman. The only other person in the company who knows how to operate this equipment. Brennan explains what he plans to do. Holbrook listens without interrupting. When Brennan finishes, Holbrook is quiet for a long time. Snow accumulates on his helmet. Finally, he shakes his head. That's treason, Ellis. I know. They'll shoot you. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. Article 104. I've read the manual. You impersonate an enemy officer, that's it. You're done. 300 men, Nate. Holbrook looks toward the eastern defensive line. Neither of them can see it in the darkness, but they both know it is there. They both know men are huddled in frozen foxholes, waiting for a dawn that will bring death. Holbrook turns back to Brennan. We're dead anyway if you don't try. That's what I figure. All right, what do you need? What Brennan needs is time. He needs to craft a transmission that will sound authentic enough to fool German officers who have spent years following military protocol. He needs coordinates that are real enough to be believable but far enough away to spare the American position. He needs to practice until his German is flawless, until his accent is perfect, until he can mimic the authority of a colonel giving orders that cannot be questioned. He has 4.5 hours. They start with the coordinates. Holbrook pulls out captured German maps taken from a destroyed command vehicle 2 weeks ago. The maps show German tactical positions, supply routes, objectives. Most importantly, they show grid references using German military notation. They need a target that sounds strategically important, a place that German tank commanders would accept as a legitimate objective. But it also needs to be far enough from the American position that redirecting the attack there will buy time. Time for Patton's reinforcements to arrive. Time for the weather to clear. Time for anything that might change the mathematical certainty of slaughter. Holbrook points to a location 8.2 kilometers south of Bastogne, a supply depot. According to the German map, it is marked as an objective for later in the offensive, which means German commanders know it exists, which means they will believe an order to attack it. What the German map does not show is that American forces evacuated that depot 3 days ago. It is empty, abandoned, but the Germans do not know that. Brennan memorizes the coordinates. Grid reference 7496, in German military notation Gitter coordinate 7496. Next, he needs to craft the message itself. The words must be German military language, formal, precise. The phrasing must follow protocol. He cannot sound like an American trying to speak German. He must sound like a German colonel issuing orders that subordinates will obey without question. He writes it out, scratch paper and a pencil stub. The words come slowly at first, then faster as the phrasing clicks into place. Panzergruppe Eisen, hier ist Oberst Müller Divisionskommando. Neue Befehle. Ihr Angriffsziel wird geändert. Nachschubdepot bei Gitterkoordinate. 7496 ist prioritäres Ziel. Verstehen Sie? Panzer Group Iron, this is Colonel Müller, Division Command. New orders. Your attack objective is changed. Supply depot at grid coordinate 7496 is priority target. Do you understand? Holbrook listens as Brennan reads it aloud. Say it again. Brennan repeats it. Then again. Then 5 more times. Each repetition he adjusts the inflection, the rhythm, the authority. He is not just speaking German. He is becoming a German colonel. He is inhabiting the voice of a man who has commanded soldiers in combat, who has issued orders that sent men to die, who expects obedience without hesitation. Holbrook closes his eyes, listening. I can't tell the difference from the real transmissions. That's the idea. But there is one more element Brennan needs. One more piece of his past that makes this possible. His grandmother. Elliot Brennan was 8 years old in 1930. His parents worked 12-hour shifts in Milwaukee textile factories. His grandmother, Greta Brennan, raised him during those long days when his parents were gone. Greta had immigrated from Bavaria in 1903. She spoke English with a heavy accent and German with the precision of education. She had worked before the war as a housekeeper for a Bavarian military family. officers of the old Imperial German Army. She had listened to them speak for years. She had absorbed not just the language but the cadence of command, the particular rhythm and music of officers giving orders to subordinates. She taught Elliot German through bedtime stories, grim fairy tales in their original language, folk songs, Christmas carols. Guten Abend, gute Nacht, sung in her clear voice while snow fell outside the window. But she taught him more than vocabulary. She taught him how to sound like he belonged, how to use the language not as a foreigner struggling with grammar, but as a native speaker who carried authority in his voice. She died in 1941, 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor. Elliot was 19. He held her hand in the hospital while she faded. Her last words to him were in German. Deine Stimme kann Brücken bauen oder Mauern. Your voice can build bridges or walls. He did not understand what she meant then. He understands now. 02:15 hours, 4 hours until the attack. Brennan huddles over the Funkgerät. Holbrook keeps watch, scanning the darkness for officers who might interrupt. The snow has slackened slightly enough that visibility extends perhaps 70 yards, enough to see the shapes of other foxholes. Enough to see men who do not know they have 4 hours left to live. Brennan listens to the German frequency. Steiner is coordinating final preparations. Tank commanders report fuel levels. Infantry sergeants confirm positions. Artillery spotters synchronize timing. Everything is proceeding according to plan. The German plan. The plan that will kill 300 Americans in 20 minutes. Brennan's hands have stopped shaking. That frightens him more than the shaking did. He has crossed some internal threshold. He has moved from contemplating an action to committing to it. Once he presses the transmit button, there is no going back. Either he saves 300 lives or he fails and faces execution for treason. The mathematics are brutal, but they are also simple. 300 lives versus 1. He would take that trade. Holbrook nudges him. Footsteps approaching through the snow. Both radiomen look up. Captain Garrett appears out of the darkness. Behind him, another figure, taller, the insignia of a major visible even in the dim starlight filtering through clouds. Major Raymond Hastings, battalion commander, 46 years old, lawyer in civilian life, Milwaukee like Brennan. They have never spoken directly, but Brennan has seen him around the battalion area. A serious man, careful with words, the kind of officer who reads regulations before making decisions. Garrett and Hastings climb down into the foxhole. It is cramped with 4 men. They huddle, close breath mingling in frozen clouds. Hastings speaks quietly. Captain Garrett briefed me on your proposal, Corporal. Yes, sir. He also briefed me on the legal implications, Article 104. Unauthorized enemy communication, capital offense. Yes, sir. Hastings is silent for a long moment. He looks at the Funkgerät, then at Brennan, then at the eastern horizon where 300 men wait for dawn. Major Hastings, Brennan says carefully, permission to speak freely, granted. Those men are going to die. We don't have ammunition to stop 12 panzers, we don't have air support, we don't have reinforcement in time. They're dead unless someone does something. I know. I can do something. Hastings nods slowly. You can, but if I authorize you to do it, I become complicit in a violation of military law. If you're caught, if anyone discovers what happened, I face court-martial for conspiracy. Captain Garrett faces the same. We could all 3 be shot. Yes, sir. And if I don't authorize you, 300 men die anyway. Yes, sir. Hastings looks at Garrett. Some communication passes between them without words. Garrett gives a tiny nod. Hastings turns back to Brennan. When he speaks, his voice is very deliberate, each word chosen with lawyer's precision. Corporal Brennan, you are dismissed. Return to your monitoring duty. Continue to report any intelligence you gather from enemy transmissions. But you are to take no other action. Do you understand these orders? Brennan understands. He understands perfectly. Hastings cannot give him authorization. To do so would be to violate military law himself, but Hastings can give him ambiguous orders that leave room for interpretation. Orders that later Hastings can claim he believed Brennan would follow literally. Plausible deniability. If Brennan acts and is caught, Hastings can say he ordered Brennan to monitor only, that Brennan acted without authorization, that Hastings had no knowledge of Brennan's intentions. It is a lawyer's answer. It protects Hastings. It hangs Brennan out to dry. It is also permission. I understand, sir. Hastings climbs out of the foxhole. Garrett follows. Before disappearing into the darkness, Garrett looks back once. His expression is unreadable. Then Brennan and Holbrook are alone again. Well, Holbrook says, I guess that's as close to a green light as we're getting. Brennan adjusts the headphones. His grandmother's voice echoes in memory. Your voice can build bridges or walls. He is about to build a bridge, or burn one. He will not know which until he presses the button. 30 hours, 3.5 hours until the attack. The German radio frequency crackles with final coordination. Brennan listens to Steiner confirm the attack timeline one more time. 06:00 hours, Eastern Sector, 12 Panzers, 250 infantry, 300 Americans dead. Unless. Brennan picks up the microphone. His hand is steady, his breathing is calm. He has crossed the threshold, fear is behind him. Now there is only the mission. Holbrook watches him. You're really doing this. I'm really doing this. Say it one more time, let me hear it. Brennan recites the transmission in German. His accent is perfect, Bavarian colonel, authority without question. Holbrook listens with his eyes closed, comparing it to the intercepts they have been monitoring for hours. I can't tell you apart from the real thing. Good. Brennan's finger rests on the transmit button. All he has to do is press down. Speak 30 seconds of German. Hope that German officers 8 kilometers away believe he is Oberst Müller from Division Command. Hope that they obey. Hope that 300 Americans see tomorrow. But there is one final thing he must accept. If this works, if German tanks turn south and attack an empty supply depot, German commanders will eventually discover they were deceived. They will investigate. They will trace the transmission. They will realize an American soldier impersonated a German colonel, and they will execute whoever gave that false order. Brennan has listened to Hauptmann Steiner for 6 hours. He has heard the man's voice, heard him coordinate with his tank crews, heard him check on his infantry sergeants. Steiner is a soldier, following orders, doing his duty. He is not a monster, he is a man. If Brennan does this, Steiner will die. German military law does not forgive officers who fail to verify orders from higher command. Steiner will be accused of cowardice or incompetence. He will face a court-martial. He will be shot. Brennan will save 300 Americans by killing 1 German. The mathematics are clear, the morality is not, but the choice is also clear. He presses the button. Static hisses through the headphones. The frequency opens somewhere 8 kilometers east. German radio operators hear the carrier wave. They hear the click of a microphone activating. They hear a voice speaking German, speaking with authority, speaking with the cadence of a Bavarian colonel who expects immediate obedience. Corporal Elliot Brennan, 22 years old, Signal Corps radioman, begins to speak. And 300 American soldiers sleeping in frozen foxholes have no idea that a voice from Milwaukee is buying them another dawn. 2:47 hours, December 18th, 1944. Elliot Brennan's finger presses the transmit button. The microphone is cold against his lips. He can feel Nate Holbrook's presence beside him in the foxhole, can sense the man holding his breath, waiting. Brennan speaks. Panzergruppe Eisen, hier ist Oberst Müller Divisionskommando. Panzergroup Iron, this is Colonel Müller Division Command. His voice is steady. The German flows naturally, each syllable precise. The Bavarian accent is there, subtle but unmistakable. The tone carries authority, not aggression, not urgency, just the calm expectation of obedience that comes from years of command. He releases the transmit button. Static fills the headphones. 30 seconds pass. Each second stretches. Brennan's heart hammers against his ribs, but his hands remain steady on the equipment. Holbrook leans closer as if proximity might somehow help. 40 seconds. Brennan's mind races through possibilities. They did not hear. The transmission was garbled. The frequency was wrong. They are conferring with actual division command right now, discovering that no Oberst Muller exists. 50 seconds. Holbrook whispers, maybe they... The headphones crackle. A voice cuts through the static. Oberst Müller, hier Panzergruppe Eisen, Hauptmann Steiner. Wir empfangen Sie. Colonel Müller, this is Panzer Group Iron Captain Steiner. We receive you. Brennan's breath catches. Holbrook grips his arm. They have responded. They believe, or at least they are listening. Brennan presses transmit again. He cannot hesitate, cannot give them time to think, to question, to verify. Hauptmann Steiner, neue Befehle. Ihr Angriffsziel wird geändert. Nachschubdepot bei Gitterkoordinate 7496 ist prioritäres Ziel. Die amerikanischen Stellungen bei Bastogne sind sekundär. Verstehen Sie? Captain Steiner, new orders. Your attack objective is changed. Supply depot at grid coordinate 7496 is priority target. The American positions at Bastogne are secondary. Do you understand? He releases the button. His hand trembles now, just slightly. Enough that Holbrook notices. 20 seconds of silence. Then Steiner's voice returns, but this time there is something different in the tone. A question, a hesitation. Herr Oberst, diese Befehle widersprechen dem ursprünglichen Angriffsplan von General Bergmann. Wir haben 3 Tage für den Angriff auf die amerikanische Oststellung vorbereitet. Colonel, these orders contradict General Bergmann's original attack plan. We have prepared 3 days for the attack on the American eastern position. Brennan's mind goes blank for one terrible second. Steiner is questioning the orders. This is not in the script he prepared. This is not something he rehearsed with Holbrook. This is a German officer, experienced and professional, doing exactly what he should do when receiving unexpected orders. Verify. Confirm question. If Brennan answers wrong, if he sounds uncertain or defensive, Steiner will know something is wrong. He will call actual division command. He will discover the deception. And in 6 hours, 300 Americans will die anyway. Holbrook stares at Brennan. The question is written on his face. What do we do now? Brennan does not know. He has 5 seconds, maybe 10, before his silence becomes suspicious. Before Steiner realizes that Oberst Müller does not sound like a colonel who expects obedience. His grandmother's voice comes back to him. Not words, just the memory of her tone, the way she spoke when she was teaching him. Calm, patient, certain, never doubting that he would understand, that he would learn, that he would become fluent. Your voice can build bridges. Brennan presses transmit. When he speaks, his voice is harder, colder, the voice of a colonel who has just been questioned by a captain, the voice of superior rank reminding a subordinate of his place. Hauptmann Steiner, General Bergmanns Plan ist überholt. Neue Aufklärung zeigt amerikanische Verstärkungen, die sich von Westen nähern. Die 3. Armee von Patton. Wir müssen die Nachschublinien sichern, bevor wir die Hauptstellung angreifen. Das Depot bei 7496 enthält Treibstoff und Munition, die wir für die erweiterte Offensive benötigen. Ihre Panzer greifen zuerst das Depot an. Verstanden? Captain Steiner. General Bergmann's plan is outdated. New reconnaissance shows American reinforcements approaching from the west. Patton's Third Army. We must secure supply lines before we attack the main position. The depot at 7496 contains fuel and ammunition we need for the extended offensive. Your panzers attack the depot first. Understood. The lie flows smoothly. It sounds plausible because parts of it are true. Patton's Third Army is approaching. American reinforcements are coming. The Germans know this. They have their own reconnaissance. What Brennan is doing is taking facts the Germans already possess and weaving them into a narrative that supports his false orders. He releases the transmit button. The silence that follows is longer. 40 seconds. 50. A full minute. Brennan can hear his own heartbeat, can hear Holbrook breathing beside him, can hear faintly the sound of wind moving snow across frozen ground. Steiner is conferring with his officers, or he is trying to reach division command, or he is deciding whether to obey orders that contradict 3 days of preparation. Brennan cannot do anything but wait 90 seconds. Then Steiner's voice returns. When he speaks, the hesitation is gone. He has made his decision. Verstanden, Herr Oberst. Wir ändern den Kurs zum Nachschubdepot. Gitterkoordinate 7496. Angriff 6 Uhr wie geplant, aber neues Ziel. Wir werden nach Süden vorrücken, Heil Hitler. Understood, Colonel. We change course to the supply depot. Grid coordinate 7496. Attack at 6 o'clock as planned, but new target. We will advance south. Heil Hitler. The words Heil Hitler hang in the frozen air. Brennan must respond. German military protocol demands it. Any officer, any soldier responding to that phrase must echo it back. To fail to do so would mark him immediately as an enemy. Brennan's throat tightens. His grandmother was Jewish. She fled Bavaria in 1903 to escape rising anti-Semitism. She raised him with stories of the old country, yes, but also with warnings. About what happens when nationalism becomes hatred. About what happens when ordinary people follow orders without questioning where those orders lead. And now her grandson must speak the words that represent everything she fled. He presses transmit. Heil Hitler. The words taste like ash. He releases the button, switches off the transmitter, pulls the headphones from his ears. His hands are shaking violently now. The adrenaline that kept him steady during the transmission is draining away, leaving him hollow. Holbrook grabs him by the shoulders. You did it. Ellis, you did it. They bought it. Brennan cannot speak. He stares at the Funkgerät, the metal case, the dials, the antenna pointing toward German positions 8 kilometers east. Through this device, he has just committed treason. Through this device, he has just saved 300 lives. Through this device, he has just killed Hauptmann Victor Steiner. Not immediately, not today, but when German commanders discover the deception, when they trace the false orders back to Steiner's decision to obey them, they will execute him for failing to verify. For cowardice. For allowing himself to be fooled. Brennan has fought Germans before. He has called artillery strikes on German positions. He has relayed targeting information that led to German deaths. That is war. That is his job. This feels different. This feels personal. He has listened to Steiner's voice for 6 hours. He knows the man's cadence, his speech patterns, his way of checking on subordinates. Steiner sounds like a professional, like a soldier doing his duty in a war he may not even believe in. And Brennan has just signed his death warrant. Holbrook is talking, but Brennan does not hear the words. He is thinking about his grandmother, about the stories she told him, about the relatives she left behind in Bavaria when she emigrated, relatives who died in the First World War, relatives who died of Spanish flu, relatives who lived through hyperinflation and depression. She taught him German so he would not forget where his family came from, so he would understand that people on both sides of any war are still people, still human, still worthy of consideration. She did not teach him German so he could use it to deceive and kill. But she also would not want him to let 300 Americans die without trying to save them. War forces choices that have no good answers, only less terrible ones. Holbrook shakes him harder. Ellis, listen to me. They're moving. The Germans are moving. Brennan's mind snaps back to the present. What? I've been monitoring the frequency. They're coordinating the change. Tank commanders confirming new route. Infantry adjusting positions. They're actually doing it. They're turning south. Brennan stares at Holbrook, then at the Funk Garate, then toward the eastern perimeter invisible in darkness and snow. It worked. 12 Panzer tanks are going to drive 8 kilometers south to attack an abandoned supply depot. 300 Americans are going to wake up to a dawn without German artillery, without tank treads crushing their foxholes, without SS infantry overrunning their positions. It worked. Brennan leans back against the frozen earth of the foxhole, closes his eyes. His whole body is shaking now. Tremors he cannot control. Holbrook sits beside him. Neither man speaks. There is nothing to say. They have just committed an act that will either be forgotten by history or remembered as treason. There is no middle ground. Above them the snow continues to fall. 3:15 hours. 2 hours and 45 minutes until dawn. Brennan and Holbrook monitor the German frequency. They hear Steiner coordinating the repositioning of his forces. It is not a simple matter to redirect an attack force. Tank crews must be briefed on new routes. Infantry must adjust assembly areas. Artillery must recalculate firing solutions. The entire machinery of a military operation must shift from one objective to another. But German military efficiency is legendary for a reason. Within 30 minutes, Steiner has reorganized his forces. The Panzer Column begins moving south, away from Bastogne, away from the American Eastern Defensive Sector, toward an empty supply depot that will yield nothing but wasted time and fuel. Holbrook records the German transmissions, not officially. The logs will not reflect this, but he writes down call signs, timestamps, brief descriptions. Evidence. If this goes wrong, if they are discovered, this record might be the only thing standing between them and immediate execution. Or it might be the rope that hangs them. Brennan listens but does not write anything down. He memorizes instead. The voices, the words, the sequence of events. He has always had a good memory for sounds. Now he is building a mental recording of everything that happens in the next 2 hours. Just in case. Just in case someone needs to know exactly what happened here, what choices were made, what prices were paid. At 0347, an American observation post reports unusual activity. German vehicle movement to the southeast, not toward Bastogne, away from it. The report goes up the chain to Captain Garrett, who acknowledges but does not comment. Garrett knows. He cannot officially know, but he knows. Brennan can imagine the captain in the command post receiving the report, understanding what it means. Knowing that if he investigates too closely, if he asks too many questions, he will have to confront something that is better left unexamined. At 0415, Major Hastings visits the eastern defensive sector. He walks the line, checks on soldiers in their foxholes, asks about ammunition, about morale, about frostbite. He does not mention the German movement, does not mention Brennan's transmission, does not mention anything that happened in the last 2 hours. But when he passes Brennan's foxhole, he stops, looks down, makes eye contact, nods once, a tiny acknowledgement, then he continues walking. Brennan understands. Hastings is creating presence, witnesses who will remember that the major was personally inspecting positions when the attack was supposed to come. Creating a narrative. If anyone questions why the attack did not materialize, Hastings can point to his inspection, can suggest that German scouts observed increased American alertness, can create ambiguity. Plausible deniability is being constructed in real time. At 0500, the eastern sky begins to lighten. Not sunrise yet, just the faint gray that precedes dawn in winter. The snow has stopped. Visibility extends to maybe 200 yards. enough to see the killing ground in front of the defensive positions, the open fields where German tanks would have advanced, where 300 Americans would have fought and died. The fields are empty. Soldiers begin to stir, emerging from foxholes, stamping feet to restore circulation, breathing into cupped hands. Waiting for the attack that intelligence said was coming. At 0530, officers brief the troops. Enemy attack expected at 06:00 hours. Eastern sector. Maintain positions. Conserve ammunition. Fire discipline. All the standard orders that men have heard before every engagement. Brennan watches from his foxhole. Watches men load weapons. Fix bayonets. Check grenades. Prepare to die defending frozen ground in a country most of them cannot find on a map. They do not know. They have no idea that the attack has already been redirected, that their survival is not the result of their preparations or their courage, but the result of one illegal radio transmission made by a corporal who speaks his grandmother's language. They will never know. At 0555, the defensive line is slint. Men crouch in firing positions. Officers scan the eastern approaches with binoculars. Artillery crews stand ready beside their few remaining shells. Everyone waits. 06:00 hours. 0 hour. Nothing happens. The snow-covered fields remain empty. No engine sounds. No tank treads. No artillery preparation. Just silence and gray dawn light spreading across frozen Belgium. 06:15. Still nothing. Officers begin conferring, passing messages up the chain. Something is wrong. German attacks do not simply fail to materialize. Either intelligence was wrong about the timing or something changed. But what soldiers remain in position? Nobody relaxes. The attack could come any moment. Could be delayed by weather or logistics or command decisions. Could hit in 10 minutes or 10 hours. They wait. 06:30. American reconnaissance patrols venture forward. Cautious, expecting ambush. They find nothing. No German forces, no recent tracks in the snow. The approaches are clear. The report goes to Captain Garrett. German attack appears to have been cancelled or redirected. Eastern sector clear. No enemy contact. Garrett receives the report without expression. Acknowledges. Orders defensive positions maintained. Then he looks toward Brennan's foxhole. Holds the gaze for 3 seconds. Looks away. At 07:00, as full daylight spreads across the battlefield, word comes from division reconnaissance. German armor spotted 8 kilometers south, engaging what appears to be an abandoned supply depot. Heavy concentrations of German forces, but not at Bastogne. The pieces begin falling into place for those officers who know enough to see the pattern. Garrett, Hastings, a few others. They do not discuss it. They do not write it down. They simply understand that something happened during the night, something that changed the tactical situation, something that saved 300 American lives. They do not investigate further. Some things are better left unexamined. For the soldiers in the eastern defensive sector, there is only confused relief. They were supposed to fight. They were supposed to die, most of them. Instead, they are alive, cold, hungry, exhausted, but alive. Private Michael Hayes, 19 years old son of Major Raymond Hastings, sits in a foxhole and stares at empty fields. He does not understand why the Germans did not attack. He only knows that he gets to see another day, gets to eat another ration, gets to write another letter home. He does not know that a corporal he has never met spoke 30 seconds of German that saved his life. At 07:30, Major Hastings walks the eastern line again. This time his expression is different, not tense, not preparing for combat, just tired. The exhaustion of a man who has been holding his breath for hours and can finally exhale. He stops at several foxholes, thanks soldiers for their vigilance, their discipline. He does not explain why the attack did not come. He lets them believe it was their readiness that deterred the Germans. Better for morale. Better than the truth. When he reaches his son's foxhole, he stops longer. They do not embrace, not in front of other soldiers, but something passes between them, father and son, both understanding that Michael came very close to dying this morning, both grateful he did not. Hastings does not visit Brennan's foxhole. That would draw attention. That would create questions. Instead, he sends Holbrook a message through a runner. Report to battalion headquarters at 0900 hours for equipment inspection. It is not really about equipment. It is about creating separation, about ensuring that Brennan and Holbrook are not together when questions are asked, about beginning the process of obscuring what happened. At 0800, German radio traffic on the captured Funkgerät changes tone. Confusion. Anger. Steiner's voice strained, reporting to higher command. The supply depot was abandoned. Empty. No fuel. No ammunition. Nothing but time wasted and fuel consumed moving the attack force 8 kilometers out of position. German division command is demanding explanations. Demanding to know who authorized the change in objective. Demanding to know where Oberst Müller's orders originated. Brennan listens to the transmissions with growing dread. This is the moment. This is when German commanders discover there is no Oberst Müller, when they trace the transmission, when they realize they were deceived, when they arrest Hauptmann Steiner for following orders that came from an American radio. At 0830, Steiner is ordered to report to division headquarters immediately. The tone of the order makes clear that this is not a debriefing. This is an arrest. Brennan removes the headphones. He cannot listen anymore, cannot hear the beginning of Steiner's end. He tells himself that Steiner is the enemy, that the man would have killed 300 Americans without hesitation, that this is war and soldiers die. It does not help. Holbrook watches him. You did what you had to do. I know. Those 300 men are alive because of you. I know. Then why do you look like that? Brennan does not answer. How can he explain that saving lives and taking lives can feel the same when you know the names, hear the voices, understand that every person who dies is someone's son, someone's husband, someone who might have preferred to live? He cannot explain. So he says nothing. At 0900, Holbrook leaves for battalion headquarters. Brennan stays in the foxhole, monitoring frequencies, performing the duties of a radio man. Around him, the defensive perimeter begins to relax, not much. The encirclement continues, but the immediate crisis has passed. Men allow themselves to believe they might survive another day. At 10:00, word arrives that changes everything. American reinforcements have broken through German lines. General George Patton's Third Army. Tanks and infantry pushing north toward Bastogne. Estimated arrival late afternoon. The siege will be lifted. The soldiers who survived the night because of Brennan's transmission will now be reinforced, resupplied. Given a chance not just to survive but to fight back. The mathematics of survival have shifted dramatically. What was certain death yesterday is now possible victory today. Brennan hears the news and feels nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just emptiness. He has committed treason to save 300 lives. He has condemned a German officer to death. He has lied to his superiors and broken laws that exist for good reasons. And the only people who know are himself, Holbrook, Garrett, and Hastings. 4 men who will never speak of this to anyone. 4 men who will carry the secret until they die. At 11:00, German radio intercepts report that Hauptmann Victor Steiner has been arrested. Charged with dereliction of duty, charged with failing to verify orders from superior command, charged with cowardice in the face of the enemy. The trial, such as it is, will be brief. German military justice in the field does not waste time on lengthy proceedings. Steiner will be found guilty. He will be executed. probably within 48 hours. All because he followed orders that sounded legitimate. Orders from a colonel who does not exist. Orders transmitted by a 22-year-old American corporal who learned German from his grandmother. Brennan sits in his foxhole and understands that he will think about Victor Steiner for the rest of his life. Will wonder what kind of man he was, whether he had a family, whether he believed in the cause he fought for or was simply doing his duty, whether in his final moments he understood why he was being executed. Brennan will never know the answers to these questions, but he will ask them, again and again, for decades. This is the price of saving 300 lives, not his own death by firing squad, not even court-martial and imprisonment. The price is knowing that he traded one life for 300 and that the man whose life he traded never knew he was part of the exchange. At 1400, American tanks roll into Bastogne. Patton's lead elements. The siege is broken. Supplies begin flowing. Ammunition, food, medical supplies, reinforcement. The 101st Airborne, which has held for days against overwhelming odds, is finally relieved. The soldiers cheer, officers shake hands. There is a feeling of victory, of survival against impossible odds, of American determination overcoming German military power. Nobody mentions that 300 men in the eastern sector were supposed to die this morning. Nobody asks why they are still alive. Nobody investigates the German radio transmission that redirected a panzer attack to an empty depot. Some questions are better left unasked. At 16:00, Captain Garrett visits Brennan's foxhole one final time. He does not climb down, just stands at the edge looking down at the corporal and his radio equipment. "Division intelligence is arriving tomorrow," Garrett says. "They want to investigate unusual German command decisions in this sector. Apparently the Germans are claiming they received false orders." Brennan meets his gaze, says nothing. "When they interview you," Garrett continues, "you will tell them you monitored German frequencies as ordered. You will tell them you reported everything you heard through proper channels. You will not volunteer any additional information." "Understood." "Yes, sir. Your monitoring logs from last night, are they complete?" "Corporal Holbrook maintains the logs, sir." "I see. And Corporal Holbrook's logs?" "I believe he follows standard procedures, sir. Records significant intelligence. Routine chatter is not always noted in detail." Garrett nods slowly. "Standard procedures, of course." He turns to leave, stops, looks back. "Corporal Brennan, 300 men are having dinner tonight because of standard procedures. I want you to remember that." "Yes, sir." Garrett walks away into the gathering dusk. Brennan watches him go. Understands that Garrett just gave him instructions on how to lie to investigators, how to protect himself, how to ensure that what happened last night remains buried. Brennan should feel grateful. Instead, he feels tired. At 1800, as darkness falls on Bastogne, Brennan sits in his foxhole and thinks about his grandmother, about the bedtime stories she told in German, about the songs she sang, about the way she taught him that language was not just words but understanding, connection, the ability to see the world through someone else's eyes. She taught him German so he could build bridges. He used it to wage war. He wonders what she would think of that, whether she would approve of saving 300 American lives at the cost of one German officer's, whether she would understand that sometimes bridges burn and walls stand and choices have no good answers. He will never know. She died 3 years ago. All he has are memories and the language she gave him, the language that saved 300 men and killed one. The language that makes him both hero and traitor depending on who tells the story. Above him, stars emerge through breaking clouds. The same stars shine on Bastogne and on German headquarters 8 kilometers east, where Victor Steiner sits in a cell awaiting execution. Brennan stares at those stars and knows that he will never tell anyone what happened. Not his parents, Not his wife when he marries, not his children when he has them, not his students when he teaches. Some secrets are too heavy to share. Some prices are paid in silence. The Eastern Defensive Sector is quiet tonight. 300 men sleep in foxholes wrapped in blankets, dreaming of home. They do not know how close they came to dying. They do not know that a corporal they never met spoke his grandmother's language and bought them another day. They just sleep, cold and hungry and exhausted, but alive. And in his foxhole, Elliot Brennan sits awake listening to static on a German radio carrying a weight that 300 men will never have to bear. December 19, 1944. Morning light breaks cold and pale over Bastogne. The encirclement is broken. Patton's tanks hold the southern approach. Supply trucks roll through liberated roads. The soldiers of the 101st Airborne who have survived 6 days of siege line up for hot food, real food, not frozen rations eaten in foxholes. Steam rises from field kitchens. Men stand in lines, stamping their feet, breathing clouds of white vapor alive. In the Eastern Defensive Sector, 312 men wake to a day they were not supposed to see. They do not know this. They believe their survival was the result of German command decisions, American defensive preparation, or simple luck. They do not ask questions. Soldiers rarely do. They accept what comes and move forward. Elliot Brennan stands in line for breakfast. He has not slept. His eyes burn from exhaustion and from staring at radio equipment for 18 hours straight. Nate Holbrook stands beside him, silent. Neither man speaks. Around them, other soldiers talk. About the relief column, about going home, about what they will do when this war finally ends. Brennan listens but does not participate. His mind is 8 kilometers east, in a German headquarters where Hauptmann Victor Steiner sits in a cell waiting for a court-martial that has already decided his fate. The German radio traffic this morning was efficient, clinical. Steiner arrested, charges filed, trial scheduled for December 20th, execution to follow immediately upon conviction. German military justice does not waste time during active operations. Brennan knows these details because he monitored the frequencies until dawn. Listened to German officers discussing the case. Listened to them analyze how Steiner could have been fooled. Listened to them conclude that only incompetence or cowardice could explain failure to verify orders from division command. None of them consider the possibility that an American corporal with a Bavarian accent could impersonate a colonel well enough to fool experienced officers. Why would they? It is impossible. It is absurd. It is what happened. A runner approaches. Young private, maybe 18. Face still soft with youth despite 6 days of combat. He stops in front of Brennan, salutes awkwardly. Corporal Brennan, you're ordered to report to battalion headquarters at 10:00 hours. Intelligence officer wants to interview all Signal Corps personnel. Brennan returns the salute. Understood. The runner leaves. Holbrook moves closer. They're starting, he says quietly. I know. You remember what Captain Garrett said? I remember. Monitor frequencies, report through channels, standard procedures, nothing else. I said I remember. Holbrook studies Brennan's face. You look like hell, Ellis. I feel like hell. Get some sleep before the interview. You need to be sharp. But Brennan does not sleep. He returns to his foxhole, sits with the Funkgerät, monitors German frequencies, listens to an army that does not know it is being overheard discussing the failure of an attack that was supposed to crush American resistance. At 09:45, he walks to battalion headquarters. The building is a partially destroyed farmhouse, walls pocked with shrapnel, roof missing tiles. Inside it is marginally warmer than outside. A potbelly stove burns in one corner. Officers and NCOs crowd around it. Captain Garrett sees Brennan enter. Their eyes meet for 1 second. Garrett's expression reveals nothing. Then he turns away, returning to a conversation with another officer. Brennan waits. Other Signal Corps soldiers arrive. Radio operators, wire crews, message runners, all summoned for the same interview. They stand in a loose group speculating about what intelligence wants. Nobody knows. Nobody seems worried. At 10:00, a new officer enters. Brennan has not seen him before. The insignia marks him as a colonel. Older man, maybe 50. Thin face, wire-rimmed glasses, the look of someone who spent his career behind a desk and now finds himself in a combat zone, uncomfortable but determined. "I am Colonel Bernard Ashford," the man announces. "Division Intelligence. I need to speak with each of you individually regarding German radioactivity in this sector during the night of December 17th to 18, who was monitoring captured German equipment." 3 soldiers raise their hands. Brennan, Holbrook, one other corporal from a different company. "You 3 first. The rest of you wait outside." The other soldiers file out. Brennan, Holbrook, and the 3rd corporal remain. Ashford gestures to a side room. They follow. The room is small. A table, 4 chairs, a clerk with a notepad. Ashford sits, studies each soldier in turn. His gaze lingers on Brennan. "Corporal Brennan, you were monitoring German frequencies the night of the 17th. "Yes, sir." "What did you hear?" Brennan recites from memory. Coordination traffic, logistics, movement orders. He mentions Panzer Group Iron, mentions Hauptmann Steiner, mentions an attack planned for 06:00 hours against the eastern sector. Ashford makes notes. "You reported this through your chain of command?" "Yes, sir. Captain Garrett was informed." "What action was taken?" "I don't know, sir. I reported the intelligence. Command decisions are above my level." Ashford nods, turns to Holbrook. "You were with Corporal Brennan?" "Yes, sir. Backup radioman." "You heard the same transmissions?" "Yes, sir." "Anything unusual, any transmissions that seemed out of place?" Holbrook does not hesitate. "No, sir. Standard German military traffic. We logged everything significant." "May I see the logs?" Holbrook produces a notebook, pages covered with abbreviated notes, call signs, timestamps, brief descriptions of content. The logs are professional, complete. They show 2 Signal Corps soldiers doing their jobs exactly as trained. They do not show a transmission at 02:47 hours from Corporal Brennan impersonating a German colonel. Ashford reviews the logs carefully, flips pages, compares entries, finally looks up. "According to German radio intercepts we've obtained through other channels, there was a transmission around 03:00 hours from someone claiming to be Oberst Müller of Division Command. This transmission redirected Panzer Group Iron to a different objective. Do either of you know anything about this?" Silence. Brennan's heart hammers, but his face remains neutral. Beside him, Holbrook breathes steadily. "No, sir," Brennan says. "We were monitoring, not transmitting. Our equipment was receive only that night." It is a lie. The Funkgerät is a transceiver. It can both receive and transmit, but receive only sounds plausible. Sounds like standard procedure for intelligence gathering. Ashford studies Brennan's face. The silence stretches. Finally, the colonel speaks again. "The Germans are claiming this transmission came from the American sector. They believe someone among our forces has sophisticated signals capability, possibly a German-speaking intelligence operative. Do we have any such personnel in this battalion?" "Not to my knowledge, sir." Garrett's voice comes from the doorway. The captain has entered without anyone noticing. "We have standard Signal Corps soldiers, radio operators, no intelligence specialists, no German speakers." Ashford turns to face Garrett. "You're certain?" "I know my men, Colonel. Farm boys, factory workers, high school graduates, good soldiers, but nobody with the training to conduct sophisticated psychological operations against German forces." Another lie. Garrett knows exactly what Brennan did, but he is protecting him, building a wall of plausible deniability. Ashford looks back at Brennan. "Where did you learn radio operation, Corporal?" "Signal Corps School, Fort Monmouth, sir. Standard 12-week course. Before the Army, I worked in a textile factory, sir, Milwaukee. Family background. The question is casual, but Brennan understands what Ashford is probing for. German heritage, German language, German connections. American, sir. Born in Milwaukee. Parents born in Milwaukee. Grandparents immigrated from Germany in 1903. You speak German? A few words my grandmother taught me when I was a child, sir. Nothing useful. Can you understand German? Basic words, numbers, simple phrases, not military terminology. Every word is carefully chosen. Technically true in a narrow sense, his grandmother did teach him when he was a child. He can understand basic words. But Brennan speaks fluent German with a Bavarian accent good enough to fool Wehrmacht officers. He does not mention this. Ashford writes notes. Thank you, Corporal. You're dismissed. Send in the next soldier. Brennan salutes, walks out. His legs feel weak. In the main room, other soldiers wait for their interviews. He passes through without speaking. Outside, the cold air hits his face like a slap. He has just lied to a colonel, repeatedly, under direct questioning. If Ashford discovers the truth, Brennan faces court-martial for the original transmission, plus additional charges for lying to a superior officer during an official investigation. But what else could he do? Tell the truth, confess that he violated Article 104, that he committed an act that military law classifies as treason. 300 men are alive because he lied then. He lies now to stay alive himself. Holbrook emerges from the building 20 minutes later, finds Brennan sitting against a wall staring at nothing. My interview went the same as yours, Holbrook says. Standard questions, I gave standard answers. He knows something is wrong. Maybe, but he can't prove anything. The logs are clean. Nobody saw us transmit. The Germans think it was one of their own officers. Steiner is going to die. Holbrook sits beside him. Steiner would have killed 300 of ours without blinking. You made a choice. You chose us. That's not wrong. It's not right either. War doesn't give us right choices, Ellis. Just choices. You made yours. Now you live with it. They sit in silence. Around them, Bastogne continues the work of survival. Soldiers dig better positions. Engineers repair damaged buildings. Medics treat frostbite and trench foot. The machinery of war grinds forward. At 1500, word spreads through the battalion. Colonel Ashford has completed his investigation. His conclusion: no evidence of American involvement in the false transmission. Most likely explanation is internal German command confusion. Possible German intelligence failure. Or perhaps a Wehrmacht officer who lost his nerve and redirected the attack to avoid combat. The investigation is closed. Brennan hears the news and feels nothing. No relief, just a dull awareness that he has escaped consequences that should have found him. That military justice has failed to catch him not because he is innocent, but because the crime he committed is too unlikely to be believed. At 1700, Captain Garrett finds Brennan, tells him to report to a different building, private meeting. No other soldiers. Brennan follows Garrett to a cellar. Major Hastings is already there waiting. The door closes, 3 men in a small space lit by a single lantern. Hastings speaks first. Colonel Ashford came to me before he closed his investigation, wanted to discuss the German claims about a false transmission. Brennan says nothing. I told him what I'm about to tell you. The transmission, if it happened, saved American lives. Approximately 300 soldiers who were in the projected kill zone. Those men are alive today because German forces attacked a different objective. Hastings pauses, looks directly at Brennan. I also told him that investigating this matter further would require me to court-martial the person responsible. That would establish a precedent. It would mean that soldiers who take unauthorized action to save American lives face execution. That precedent would devastate morale. It would chill initiative. It would send a message that following regulations is more important than saving brothers in arms. What did he say? Garrett asks. He said he understood. He said his report would reflect no evidence of American involvement. He said the matter is classified top secret, all records sealed. Brennan finds his voice. Why would he do that? Hastings is quiet for a long moment. When he speaks again, his voice is softer. Colonel Ashford has a nephew, Private Roger Ashford, 19 years old, assigned to a rifle company in the Eastern Defensive Sector, the sector that was supposed to be overrun yesterday morning. Understanding dawns. Brennan stares at Hastings. Private Ashford is alive. Hastings continues. He wrote a letter to his uncle yesterday afternoon, talked about how lucky they were that the German attack never came. How he gets to go home now because someone upstairs decided to send German tanks somewhere else. Hastings steps closer. Colonel Ashford knows what you did, Corporal. He can't prove it, but he knows, and he's choosing not to prove it because his nephew is alive, because 300 soldiers are alive, because sometimes the mathematics are very simple. 300 lives versus military regulations, and the lives win. What happens now? Brennan asks. Now we forget this conversation happened, Garrett says. Colonel Ashford's report becomes the official record. German command confusion, no American involvement, case closed. The files get stamped top secret and buried in archives. For how long? 30 years minimum, Hastings says. Standard classification period, maybe longer, depends on whether anyone thinks this incident is worth remembering. And Steiner, Brennan cannot help asking. The German officer. Hastings' expression darkens. According to our intelligence intercepts, Hauptmann Victor Steiner will be court-martialed tomorrow. He'll be found guilty of dereliction of duty. The sentence will be death by firing squad. Execution will be carried out immediately. The words land like physical blows. Brennan's chest tightens. He has known this was coming, has known since 02:47 hours yesterday morning. But hearing it confirmed makes it real in a way that anticipation did not. That's not your fault, Garrett says quietly. That's German military justice. That's their choice to execute an officer who followed orders that sounded legitimate. He followed my orders, Brennan says. I gave them. I'm responsible. You're responsible for saving 300 American soldiers, Hastings corrects. Steiner is responsible for being a Wehrmacht officer serving a regime that executes its own men for minor failures. Don't confuse those things. But Brennan cannot separate them. In his mind they are connected. He spoke. Steiner obeyed. Steiner dies. Cause and effect, action and consequence. His voice, his grandmother's language, his choice. Hastings moves to the door, stops, looks back. Corporal Brennan, what happened in that foxhole is between you, God, and your conscience. The Army doesn't want to know. The official record says it never happened. You'll be transferred to another unit in 2 weeks. New assignment. New soldiers who never heard about German radio deception at Bastogne. You'll finish the war. Go home. Live your life. And you'll never speak of this to anyone, ever. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. Dismissed. Brennan salutes. Walks up stairs that feel too steep. Emerges into darkness. The sun has set while they talked. Stars shine cold and distant overhead. He walks back to his foxhole. Sits with the Funkgerät. Does not turn it on. Just sits in the darkness listening to silence. Somewhere 8 kilometers east, Victor Steiner sits in a cell. Tomorrow he will stand before officers who have already decided his guilt. He will be given a chance to speak. He will probably defend his actions, say he followed orders from division command. Say the transmission sounded authentic. Say he did his duty as he understood it. It will not matter. The verdict is predetermined. The sentence is mandatory. By this time tomorrow, Steiner will be dead. Because Elliot Brennan spoke 30 seconds of German. Because his grandmother taught him her native language with love and patience and hope that he would understand where his family came from. Because war takes tools of peace and turns them into weapons. Brennan thinks about his grandmother, Greta Brennan, dead 3 years now, buried in Milwaukee while her grandson fights in Europe. She fled Bavaria in 1903 to escape anti-Semitism, fled to America where she believed her children and grandchildren would be safe, would be free, would never have to choose between conscience and law. She was wrong. Her grandson sits in a frozen foxhole in Belgium having made exactly that choice, having violated law to follow conscience, having saved lives by taking one. He wonders what she would say to him now, whether she would approve, whether she would understand, whether she would tell him he did the right thing, or whether she would mourn that her language became an instrument of war. He will never know. All he has are memories and the language she gave him, the language that saved 300 men and killed one, the language that makes him both hero and criminal depending on who writes the history. December 20th, 1944. Evening. German radio intercepts report that Hauptmann Victor Steiner was executed by firing squad at 1600 hours. The charges: dereliction of duty, failure to verify orders, conduct unbecoming an officer. The sentence was carried out at a field headquarters 8 kilometers southeast of Bastogne. Brennan receives this information from an intelligence summary distributed to Signal Corps personnel. The report is clinical, brief, just another data point in the vast machinery of war. Thousands of men die every day. One more German officer is statistically insignificant. Brennan reads the report 3 times, then burns it in a small fire, watches the paper curl and blacken and disintegrate into ash, the way paper does, the way evidence does, the way memory should but does not. That night he dreams in German, his grandmother's voice telling stories. Fairy tales about forests and witches and children who get lost but find their way home. Then her voice shifts, becomes deeper, becomes male, becomes Victor Steiner's voice speaking the same stories but in a military cadence. Orders instead of fairy tales, commands instead of comfort. Brennan wakes in darkness, shaking. The dream fades, but the guilt remains, will remain, he knows now, for the rest of his life. This is the price, not court-martial, not execution. The price is carrying the weight of what he did, understanding that he saved lives by taking one. That the mathematics worked, but the morality did not. That war forced him to choose, and he chose, and now he lives with that choice forever. 2 weeks later, true to Hastings's word, Brennan receives transfer orders. New unit, different sector, fresh start. Nobody in his new assignment knows about Bastogne, about German radio deception, about the transmission that never officially happened. He becomes just another radio man, monitoring frequencies, relaying messages, operating equipment. The war continues for 5 more months. Germany surrenders in May 1945. Brennan survives, goes home to Milwaukee, receives honorable discharge, returns to a country that welcomes soldiers as heroes. He is not a hero. He is a man who committed treason and was never caught, who violated military law and was protected by officers who valued lives over regulations, who speaks his grandmother's language and will never speak it again without remembering Victor Steiner's execution. He enrolls in college on the GI Bill, studies education, becomes a high school teacher, American history. He teaches teenagers about World War II, about D-Day and Bastogne and the Battle of the Bulge. He teaches them about courage and sacrifice and the cost of freedom. He does not teach them about illegal radio transmissions, about impersonating enemy officers, about the complicated morality of saving lives by taking one. Those lessons are not in the textbook. In 1946, Elliot Brennan marries Helen Morrison. They have 3 children. He is a good father, patient, kind. He teaches his children his grandmother's language, German. He tells them it is important to understand where their family comes from, to know that people on all sides of any conflict are human, are worthy of consideration. He does not tell them why he knows this, does not tell them about Victor Steiner. About 30 seconds that saved 300 lives, about choices that have no good answers. Years pass. His children grow. His students graduate. Bastogne becomes history. The veterans age. Some die. The war recedes into memory, into textbooks, into the past. Brennan never forgets. Cannot forget. Every December 18th he thinks about the transmission, about Steiner's execution, about 300 men who lived and one who died. The mathematics never change. The morality never clarifies. In 1975, 31 years after Bastogne, military records from World War II begin systematic declassification. A historian named Dr. Patricia Donovan, researching the Battle of the Bulge, requests files on unusual tactical events in the Bastogne sector. Among the documents she receives is a file marked Top Secret. The file is thin, just a few pages, but its contents are extraordinary. Colonel Bernard Ashford's investigation report from December 1944. German claims of false radio transmission. American denial of involvement. Recommendation that incident be classified indefinitely to protect operational security. And attached to the report a handwritten note, added years later by someone with access to the classified files. The note reads, "For the record, Corporal Elliot Brennan's Signal Corps conducted unauthorized transmission on German military frequency December 18, 1944, 02:47 hours. Impersonated German colonel, redirected enemy attack, saved approximately 300 American lives. Protected from prosecution by decision of Division Intelligence and Battalion Command. This action violated Article 104 but resulted in exceptional preservation of American lives. Recommend against retroactive court-martial. Classification maintained." The note is not signed, but the handwriting analysis will later identify it as belonging to Major Raymond Hastings. Written sometime in the 1950s, placed in the file so that if anyone ever discovered what happened, they would understand why Brennan was protected. Dr. Donovan reads this file with growing astonishment. She has found a story that changes her understanding of Bastogne, of the Battle of the Bulge, of what soldiers are capable of when regulations conflict with survival. She contacts the Veterans Administration, requests information on Elliot Brennan, discovers he is alive, living in Milwaukee, teaching high school, 52 years old. She writes him a letter, explains her research, asks if he would be willing to be interviewed about events in December 1944. Brennan receives the letter on a Tuesday afternoon, reads it standing in his kitchen. His hands shake. After 31 years of silence, someone knows. Someone has found the file. Someone is asking questions. He could refuse the interview, could claim he does not remember, could maintain the silence that has protected him for 3 decades. But he is tired of carrying the secret, tired of wondering if what he did was right or wrong. Tired of teaching students about courage without being able to explain what courage actually costs. He writes back, agrees to the interview. They meet in his living room. Dr. Donovan brings a tape recorder. Brennan's wife Helen sits with them, hearing for the first time the full story of what her husband did 31 years ago. Donovan asks careful questions. Brennan answers honestly, describes the intercept, the decision, the transmission, the consequences. He does not glorify it, does not claim heroism, just describes what happened and why. When he finishes, Donovan asks the question everyone wants answered. Do you regret it? Brennan is silent for a long time. Helen reaches over, takes his hand. I regret that war forced me to make that choice, he finally says. I regret that Victor Steiner died. I regret that I had to use my grandmother's language as a weapon. But I don't regret saving 300 American lives. I'd make the same choice again, even knowing the consequences, even knowing. The interview is published in a military history journal in 1976, then picked up by newspapers. Brennan's story spreads. Veterans organizations contact him. Men who were in the Eastern Defensive Sector that morning, men who survived because German tanks turned south. They want to meet him, want to thank him, want him to know that their children and grandchildren exist because of 30 seconds on December 18, 1944. In 1977, a reunion is organized. 300 soldiers, or rather the survivors. By 1977, some have died. Natural causes, age, disease, but 243 are still alive. They gather in Milwaukee, bring their families. Brennan stands in a hotel ballroom facing 243 men and their wives and children and grandchildren. Over 1,000 people, all connected by a single thread, his voice, his grandmother's language, his illegal transmission. An elderly veteran stands, former sergeant. He was in the Eastern Sector. He speaks. My son is here today. He's 42 years old. He exists because you saved my life. My grandchildren are here. They exist because you saved my life. Mr. Brennan, you didn't save 300 lives that morning. You saved thousands, all of us, all the children and grandchildren who wouldn't exist if we died. The mathematics shift. 300 becomes thousands. One death becomes generations prevented. The calculation changes, but Brennan's answer remains the same. I'm glad you survived, he says simply. All of you. I'm glad your families exist, but I want you to remember that a German officer died because I deceived him. Victor Steiner. He had a family too. They lost him because of what I did. Don't forget that. The room is silent. These men are veterans. They understand. They know war is not simple mathematics. That survival comes at costs that cannot be calculated in numbers alone. Elliot Brennan dies in 1998 at the age of 75. Heart failure. Peaceful death in his sleep. Helen finds him in the morning, hand resting on a photograph. The photo shows a young corporal in winter gear, headphones around his neck, standing beside radio equipment. Bastogne, December 1944. At his funeral, the church is full. Students he taught, veterans he saved, family he loved. The eulogy mentions his service in World War II, mentions Bastogne, mentions courage. What it does not mention is the complicated legacy of a man who violated military law, deceived enemy soldiers, caused one death to prevent 300, and carried the weight of that choice for 53 years. In 2002, 4 years after Brennan's death, the United States Army awards him the Soldier's Medal posthumously. The citation reads, "For heroism not involving actual conflict with an armed enemy, Corporal Elliot Brennan demonstrated exceptional courage and initiative in taking unauthorized action that preserved American lives during the siege of Bastogne." The medal is presented to Helen Brennan at a ceremony in Washington. She accepts it, holds it, thinks about the man she married, the secrets he carried, the choices he made. That night, she places the medal in a box with his other possessions. Letters, photographs, his grandmother's recipe book written in German, the things that made him who he was. Today, the incident is taught at West Point. Military ethics courses use it as a case study. When is it morally correct to disobey orders? When does individual conscience supersede military law? When are regulations less important than lives? The questions have no easy answers, just as they had no easy answers on December 18, 1944, when a 22-year-old corporal pressed a transmit button and spoke his grandmother's language into darkness. The Battle of the Bulge ended in Allied victory. German offensive collapsed. American forces pushed into Germany. The war ended 5 months later. Bastogne became a symbol. American resilience, determination, the ability to hold against impossible odds. Tour guides tell visitors about the siege, about Patton's relief column, about soldiers who fought in sub-zero temperatures. Some tour guides mention unusual German tactical decisions that morning of December 18th. How an attack that should have overrun American positions never materialized. How German forces were inexplicably redirected to secondary objectives. How 300 American soldiers survived against all tactical projections. Few guides know why. Fewer still mention Elliot Brennan's name. The incident remains classified in some documents, mentioned only in specialized military history texts, known to scholars but not to the general public, which is how Brennan wanted it. He never sought fame, never claimed heroism. He was a man who made an impossible choice in impossible circumstances, who used a gift his grandmother gave him in a way she never intended, who saved lives by taking one, who carried that weight until the day he died. In Milwaukee, there is a high school. Students walk past a memorial plaque in the entrance hall. The plaque honors teachers who served in World War II. Elliot Brennan's name is listed among them. Just a name, just a teacher who served. Nothing distinguishes him from the others. But in a box in an attic there is a soldier's medal, and a photograph, and a tape recording of an interview from 1976, and the memory of a man who spoke German to save American lives. The stars that shone over Bastogne on December 18, 1944, shine still. The foxholes have filled in. The rubble has been cleared, the buildings rebuilt. The soldiers who fought there have aged and died and been replaced by new generations who know the war only through textbooks and documentaries. But the choice Elliot Brennan made remains. Frozen in time, preserved in classified documents and military ethics courses in the memories of families who exist. Because 300 men survived a morning they should not have. War creates impossible choices, forces people to decide between law and conscience, duty and morality, following orders and saving lives. Most people never face such choices. Elliot Brennan did, and he chose. 300 American soldiers lived. 1 German officer died. The mathematics are simple. The morality is not. The weight of that choice cannot be calculated in numbers. Only in the silence of a man who carried it for 53 years, who understood that sometimes voices build bridges, and sometimes they burn them, and sometimes in the darkness of war they do both at once. The transmission lasted 30 seconds. The consequences lasted a lifetime. The legacy continues still in ethics courses and history books and the 3,500 descendants of men who survived December 18, 1944, because a corporal spoke his grandmother's language into a German radio and hoped that courage and deception and desperate mathematics would be enough. They were enough. 300 men saw another dawn. 1 man died for following orders that came from an impossible source. And a 22-year-old corporal named Elliot Brennan learned that the voice his grandmother gave him could save lives and take them, could build bridges and wage war, could be a gift and a weapon and a weight he would carry until his heart stopped beating 53 years later in a bed in Milwaukee, hand, resting on a photograph of the young soldier he used to be. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is break the rules. Sometimes the hardest thing is living with what breaking them costs. And sometimes in the mathematics of war, 300 lives minus 1 equals a choice that changes everything, and nothing that saves soldiers and condemns officers, that makes heroes and creates ghosts who haunt the quiet hours when old men wake at night and remember voices speaking German in the darkness and the price of every word.